Hey, I'm Josh Kavensky, co-host of the TPM Social Club podcast here with Joe Ragazzo. How's it going, Joe?
It's going good, Josh. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. We had the perfect guest on today to talk about sports and the American right. Our own Kate Riga.
Yeah, I thought this episode was great. It was a lot of fun, and very fertile ground. Kate was a perfect guest because there's a lot going on with sports and the American right, and a lot of what's going on with sports and the American right comes out of the WNBA, and Kate is a WNBA super fan. And so it was really great to just talk to her and kind of and hear about, sort of the rhythms of the league and like what are the issues that keep popping up, why this has become such a fascination for the right. And then also Kate covers the Supreme Court and a lot of issues in the Supreme Court lately, or at least the specifically the trans issue has a lot of overlap with sports. So she was really the perfect person to talk to.
Yeah, she really was. And I agree. I mean, her insights on like the Supreme Court, on politics, and how it all intersects with sports, and also like, you know, why it's irrelevant. Like I thought was really helpful because that's like the fundamental thing is that it's sports was supposed to like it's like a fun pastime. Like something that fundamentally should unify people. It's a great way of spending your time. It's time where you don't have to think about like the horrible political situation that we're in.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, like the right tries to just like contort it and make it fit into everything they want.
Yeah, we didn't even really get into talk. It's a good point. We didn't even really talk that much about how like this sort of affects the viewing experience for like everyone, because you're sort of subject to these takes whether you want to be or not. Like they find their way to you. Um, things like with Caitlin Clark of the WNBA, like is she a victim of like racial animosity? Right? It's like I don't even really watch the WNBA yet. I got tons of people asking me about this. It's like, what do you want me to tell you? I don't know. Like, that's why we had brought Kate on. But what I do know is you didn't care about the WNBA until last week. So what is your like? What do you like? That's a leading question. I think is what's going on here. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and yeah, Kate is great. Also, yeah, she is like an encyclopedia on that WNBA, which is awesome. Um, so yeah, that was really cool to have. But yeah, Kate's great. She's also, on loan to us for this episode from the Kate Josh podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also we're getting gracious about that. But yeah, please listen in. It's a great app and enjoy.
Yeah, and one thing before we bring Kate in. If you are not a member of TPM, we have a sale going on right now, $38 for an annual membership. And if you already are a member, or you'd prefer to just make a one-time contribution, we're in the middle of our TPM Journalism Fund, which is so important for us. It helps us continue to do the great work and make ends meet. We're in the middle of a pretty big company transition right now. The media is changing all the time in terms of people's consumption habits, and that can be expensive to kind of like shift the way we do things and develop distribution patterns or methods and things like that. So if you like this show or anything else to do with TPM, please consider being a member, contributing to the journalism fund. And the very least you could do is like the YouTube channel at TPM-video. That would be awesome. Also like us, like this podcast, TPM Social Club on all, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. That'd be great. So enough pitches. We'll get to the show. Thanks, guys.
Hey, and so here today we have Kate Riga of Talking Points Memo. You might have heard of it. Joining us on the podcast. How's it going, Kate?
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on to talk about sports and the American right wing. Uh, where do we begin? I mean, do we want to start off with Kash Patel and the U.S. men's hockey team popping the cork? Like, yeah,
I think I'd like to start with Cash because Cash, at least for me, that was where the germ of this idea kind of like started to congeal, which is that at least for me, there's like a weird way in which certain people on the right want to interact with sports. And that is they can't just be like a passive observer. they have to kind of like insert themselves into it and kind of like be a part of the story. And it's like, when the men's hockey team, like, they win the Olympic gold medal, it's this huge event. And then Kash Patel, of all people, is like in the locker room, and it was just so strange. It was so strange, and I think it's like, in a bigger picture, like, if you were to extrapolate this, what it means outside of sports, this kind of behavior, it's just this tendency for this administration, and it's sort of apparatchiks outside of it, to just ruin things, because they have to like be a part of it, and they can't just like let it happen, right? They always have to. And it's especially like galling because we hear for like 10, 15, 20 years from a lot of these same folks, like the left or Democrats, they politicize everything. And it's like, well, no, you're just like reading politics into certain things. It's you all who literally insert yourselves into the story. And so I just thought it was so strange. And you can kind of see like the team was like, I guess this is cool. I don't know, like, what's going on. And so it kind of like ruins that moment a little bit. And so it's just very weird. I don't know what your gut instincts were when you saw that, or your reactions to it were, but Kate, I'm sure it wasn't. You had to be like kind of shocked about it.
Well, it also just is so in keeping with the people who have these really important jobs, conceiving of them as just kind of wells of perks, like they have no interest in the public service side of things, and they're only really interested in how like being this powerful important person means you can get into the USA locker room and like use the private jets to go to your like girlfriend's national anthem singings. Like we just had a story the other day about how JD Vance has been like shuttling his children around DC in like official planes and everything. So um it- it's it's that piece. It's what you just kind of touched on with this just total refusal to see that the imposition of your presence could detract from the team's accomplishment here. Like that is such a bygone thing of like a president like Obama who would be like, well, I know if I'm there it's going to cause a kerfuffle and anger. So I'll just like remove myself. I
Yeah.
mean, Trump could literally not imagine doing that. And obviously the Kash Patel thing also came on the heels of Trump calling into the men's team and making fun of the women's team, right? So it's just like it took this whole thing, which should have been like this big unifying American moment, and made it like totally shitty and divisive.
The thing where Trump called, I want to like just pause on that for a second, because that to me, this is such a good example of how he kind of distorts things and makes things worse, because you have him make the joke about the women's team, and you hear the guys on the hockey team laugh. And I've been in, look, I don't want to go like locker room talk, whatever, but I've been in locker rooms, and after a victory or after a win, everyone is kind of just so jubilant that you could just be like shouting random words and phrases and people are going to laugh, right? Like everyone's like in a good, joyous mood. But then that becomes a story that these guys are like laughing at the women's team, right? And it's like, whether or not, like, whatever their opinion of the women's team is, it shouldn't have even been like a topic. Like that's not like what anyone was thinking about in the locker room before he brings that up. And it just, he just taints things, and it's just it's maddening. And we'll talk about it later. But like, he comes back for round 2 in the World Cup, in a much more major way, and we'll get to that in a bit.
There is also, I just want to add one moment on the call where Trump says basically, I'm going to have to invite the women's team. I have to invite them or I'll be impeached. And like in the first half of that statement, one of the guys, I don't know the men's team, but like one of the captains or something is kind of starting to say like, yeah, like they won gold too, right? Like a kind of excited, like big win thing. And then the sentence like takes the turn into them realizing Trump is like being a bitch about it, and
Yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
it's so, it's just, he just can't feign like non-partisanship, a non-ideological stance for like the 30 seconds in which he wants to call this team.
Yeah, and it's also this way of seeing the world where everything is part of the culture war.
Yeah.
Like it's not just that, we won. It's that it's like the men won and the women are somebody we have to make fun of. Or like, I mean, you could even, I don't think this didn't happen, but you could easily imagine him or somebody saying like, well, at least none of them were trans. Like it's that sort of impulse to be like, this isn't just something that happened and that is good, or like an example of everything, for all of America, but actually this is like a validation of like our deepest political beliefs. And it's like, why? Like that's like totally irrelevant.
And
I
that,
think yeah.
I was going to say, that manifests like in a real way, like a couple days after all of this, when Brady Kachuk, who's on the U.S. men's hockey team, the White House puts out one of these. I forget if it was like an AI video or just like a cut, but it's basically just like dumping on Canada. And the Kachuk family, the brothers, they're very conservative. Okay, they I'm sure they like are very MAGA and they probably love Trump. But even Brady comes out and has to say like, "Yo, I play in Canada. Like like I live in Canada. Like what? Like I would never say that. Like why do you?" And it's exactly what you're saying, Josh. Where it's almost like they have these blinders on, or they're so deep in the shit that they don't realize like everyone else is not just doing culture war all the time. Like everyone is not just figuring out like, okay, so how does this fit into my vengeance against libs? Like it's just not how people operate or how they're thinking. But that is how this operates.
And it's such a piece of like the heritage American, like patriotism only belonging to the right thing that, like, both of you have alluded to this, but this idea that there can be no American victory, even when Americans win something, it has to be like kind of immediately claimed by the MAGA ranks and juxtaposed to the libs in some way, like find some way for it still to, be like a defeat of the libs.
Yeah, I mean,
One,
and you see this like across the culture. I feel like this is a little off topic, but like, this movie, The Odyssey, is coming out this weekend, and I feel like I see all this commentary on the right where people are just immediately complaining about like the racial or gender composition of the cast, and it's like a really similar thing where it's like, why? Like, what does it have to do with like anything like remotely relevant to like going to see like a big summer blockbuster? Like, it's crazy, and that it's like, I feel like that's an impulse like you just see in sports all the time. So even sometimes, like, I remember during like Black Lives Matter when like people were taking the knee. Like, I mean, it's like I don't know. In some ways, I guess maybe that's not a great example because that was kind of a political stance by the athletes themselves. But even so, it just felt like the reaction was to be like as divisive as possible.
I feel like that's a good segue to set up what might become like the Kate hour of the pod, which is the entire fascinate. I don't even know if it's a fascination. It's sort of like a fascination, sometimes a fetishization. The WNBA in the right. It's fucking weird. It's really weird. The obsession with Caitlin Clark and like the perceived abuse that she receives. And then there's like, in my mind, the equally strange like obsession with Sophie Cunningham, which feels I don't know, it's weird. It just feels weird. Harkens back to like when they were obsessed with Sydney Sweeney, but in a lot of ways like even weirder. Um and these conversations about the WNBA are always presented in terms of race and sex and like, you know, race wars and like, and there's gender dynamics there because the WNBA there's like a lot of lesbians, and it's just I never heard anybody talking about I didn't know any men, especially on the right, talking about the WNBA 2 or 3 years ago. And now I have people reaching out to me with all kinds of takes. Like they love the WNBA. And I don't know, Kate, what do you think about that?
It's it's so interesting because it's like such a tension point of all these different dynamics, right? That began when Caitlin Clark and her kind of logo threes made it impossible for men to ignore women's sports for a time, right? She was so exciting that even people who usually, dismiss and demean women's sports were kind of on board because she was like the most exciting thing happening. There was no more exciting basketball player kind of in general at that point. Um, but the race war stuff started immediately. Like back in college, it was her versus Angel Reese on LSU. And the events that kind of prompted this race war stuff was just, it was ridiculous back then, right? It was, Angel like making a gesture that she was going to get the ring and Caitlyn wasn't at the end of, one of these big games. And it turned into like a huge deal where Angel got all this abuse. And the thing is, like, Caitlyn is a shit talker. She was a shit talker then. She's a shit talker now. Like, she has always dished it out. So the right's conception of her as this kind of, pure as the driven snow little white girl who's getting abused by the thugs in the league has always just been like completely ridiculous. Like, she's had a temper problem since she was a young teen. But now we just keep getting these repetitive cycles where always a Black player will commit some kind of foul on her, often a foul that is, hard and kind of looks bad in an isolated clip. It breaks containment. You have the Dave Portnoys, you have like all the obnoxious kind of right-wing curious sports commentator guys weigh in. And then eventually it makes its way up the pipeline to like Trump, and Republican Congress people who in this latest iteration of this story sent a letter saying, the league is going to be under investigation by the DOJ and the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission if they don't stop the quote racially motivated attacks on Caitlyn. And it just like, it really does combine all of these tension points as the league has grown a ton, as Caitlyn has brought in people who weren't interested in the league before and don't really have a sense of its history. And then that's bringing in a lot of this, like, there wouldn't be a league if not for Caitlyn. And people who have been into the WNBA for a long time are like so offended by that, right? Because it was built on the backs of women who were not paid, who were taking, commercial flights, like who were kind of blood, sweat, and tears to kind of create what Caitlyn has come into. You have the piece where WNBA officiating comes under huge scrutiny because they are paid for rookie refs $1,500 per game. NBA refs are making like $500,000 steady salary, so no good refs want to stay in the WNBA, right? They want to get to where they're getting paid more. And then you have the piece where the league has always had kind of come under fire for promoting white players instead of Black ones, even if the white players maybe have not really earned the right to be the face of the league yet. This was like a huge discourse with Sabrina Ionescu before Caitlin Clark came in, probably the one person who's like so relieved that Caitlin is on the scene now. So, it's just like this huge powder keg, and it's a well that keeps giving, right? Because like there's always going to be fouls in basketball. So you're always going to have an example of this in a league that's like 70% Black of, Black players like menacing Caitlin.
There's something about look, I want to come out here and forcefully acknowledge that I'm not a huge WNBA fan. Okay. I'm not sitting there watching every game. So I can't speak like Kate can authoritatively on the league and its goings on. But I've watched sports and I've watched basketball my whole life. And like, when I hear these arguments, like one of the things that drives me nuts is like sports are just rough and people get hurt and people don't like each other for all kinds of reasons. That's like nothing new. Like there are rivals and there are hard fouls, and that's like part of sports. And when political people with agendas start talking about sports and they don't have the context and the history that grounds and like how sports work, you get these ridiculous takes and these ridiculous things like, like you said, the Congress people, like the protection of Caitlin Clark. Like, what are we talking about? I wish somebody would have done that when LeBron was on the Cavs and he was just getting his ass beat every game for his whole career. Like that would have been nice if someone was like, "Hey, stop hurting LeBron," because it'd be nice if Cleveland could win a title, right? I would have loved that. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
Isn't that also what you're saying? It's like a classic, like this happens to the stars, right?
Yeah.
Like people go at them harder. It's like that's almost a mark of respect.
They have a thing called the Jordan rules. The Jordan rules. Like we're gonna go out there, we're gonna beat this guy's ass, right? Like, and it's just yeah. I want to touch on one thing you said before I kick it over to Josh for his take, which is you mentioned the conservative like sports media, which is interesting because there is no equivalent on the left, right? I actually Googled this before we started. Is there an equivalent? Like I was trying to think, am I forgetting anything? Like, are there outlets like Outkick on the left? All I
think
could think of was like defector, which is
that
like
was what I was gonna say. That's like the only thing that kind of exists.
yeah, and it's like really an entirely different kind of thing, right? They're not really lefty; they just see the world as it is and write about sports. But here's the thing: Outkick, started by Clay Travis, sports site. It's, their whole thing is like, we're trying to put the right back in sports, whatever. He eventually replaces Rush Limbaugh, and Outkick is bought by Fox News. So it's like there literally is this pipeline of like, we have our foot soldiers who are going out there and watching the sports, and then we're going to elevate the issues that we can culture war and then disseminate them out on the airwaves. We'll do it on, on the radio, on the talk radio side, and we'll do it on the Fox side. And that's how you create these echo chambers where all of a sudden, like, 7-year-old guys who don't even like women's sports are texting about Caitlin Clark, right? That's how it happens. That's how it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this like during the 2024 election. Just that's when people were really talking about the manosphere and like people were like losing their minds or like wither young men, right? But I do remember at that time it becoming really clear to me that like any remotely male-coded hobby or interest would just if you looked into it on the internet, like it would just immediately send you down like a rabbit hole of like right-wing content. Um, and that, definitely went for sports and for other things. But like all that, what you were saying, Kate, with like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, it's really crazy to me how that, like the core motive there comes from just like the ugliest parts of the far right. There is a really interesting case in Texas, right, that like just kind of finished, but it was a high school sports incident. And so high school football, two teams playing, there's a scuffle on the field between a black player and a white player. The black player stabs the white one. The white teenager dies. Horrible story, right? It's really, really tragic. And it would have been just this like kind of local tragedy. Had a bunch of like neo-Nazis not seized on it and tried to turn it into this like national thing. And it's really striking that the language that they talk about that in is just like very similar to like what you see where people talk about these like confrontations that haven't like happen in national sports between like white players and like black ones. It's like on the right. Like they aren't nearly as blunt about it. Like it's all sort of like a dog whistle and it's all kind of coded, but like it's basically the same thing where they're like trying to race bait people and stoke that kind of hatred. And it's I guess another what it is about sports in particular that makes that like such like a fertile ground for it is just because everybody like watches sports. It's like a national just like interest. Is because there's something about like the way people compete with one another that like brings out these like darker like I don't know like I don't know why it is that sports in particular is like it's an area where like, people feel like they can be safe saying things that like in any other context would like get them like shouted down like kicked out of the room.
Totally. And I think like the right's obsession with women's sports is both because it is such like a fertile ground for their favorite issues, right? The trans girl stuff, which we'll get to more later, and like repeated physical clashes between white people and black people, right? Like in some ways it's just an extension of like, Fox News will seize on one incident of like a black person committing a violent crime against a white person and like make it wall to wall kind of banner news type thing. It is just kind of that exemplified. But it's also because the WNBA and kind of, women's soccer and women's hockey and all of these like women's professional leagues are burgeoning right now. And like the W in particular is, they are bringing in tons and tons of new fans, right? Like after Caitlin came Paige Beckers, you have Angel, you have Asia, you have all these new stars. Like young girls are getting really into it, in part because it's just more visible than it's ever been before. You have the new players agreement. They're making real salaries. They're getting chartered flights. They're getting better treatment, and housing and protection from pregnancy discrimination. All the streamers and the networks are like fighting to get a piece of WNBA streaming now. And this is directly hitched to the popularity of women's college basketball, which has kind of long eclipsed men's college basketball because women have to stay in college all 4 years and men don't. So there's a lot more fertile ground to kind of find stars then and get attached to them and then follow them into the league. So you have this like league of mostly, Black gay women that's experiencing historic success amidst our greater kind of authoritarian backslide. And like everything about this league is what people on the right hate, right? I mean, you can't fit kind of a professional female athlete who's got the money to be kind of financially independent and the protection to be politically outspoken. Like, you can't jive that with the kind of Christian nationalist traditional gender roles, like women should be barefoot in the house thing. So, it both is a perfect kind of projection screen for their pet issues, and it's something they want to harm, right? They want to like take down. This is all part of the, Tim Burchett and people saying like, well, Caitlyn should go play in Europe. That's so they want the W to fail, right? It's all wrapped up. It's one kind of cohesive mission.
I also think I want to add to something you said. Just I want to like pull it out, tease it out, which is, you know, there are a couple of areas of life where it's just an objective fact that like Black people kind of dominate them. One of them is sports, like at least in America, right? Like basketball, football. I mean, and if you are a white nationalist or just an extremist of any kind, of a regular racist, someone who believes in like replacement theory, you look at some of these sports leagues and you're like, this is what I'm afraid of. Imagine if imagine if America looked like the NBA, like, or the NFL, so I think it's impossible to understate that. Now, obviously not everyone that's mad about it is coming from that animus. I don't want to imply that, but it's there. I mean, when you're talking about white nationalists showing up at high school sports and trying to make a point about what's going on in America, that's exactly what's happening. And just needs to be said. So I think that's one reason why why sports is like ground zero for this stuff. So well, I
Totally.
think
And I was just going
go
to
ahead.
add real quick, also because it has the potential to be the right's greatest nightmare in terms of like multicultural liberalism, right? Like a place where like different kinds of players are playing next to each other, where like, look at the World Cup stuff, how it like kind of brought the world together. Like it gave Americans like a chance to show themselves to not be like hateful xenophobic freaks for a few weeks. It's just like I think
Yeah.
it's a real threat. So they have to kind of impose their agendas here and keep it, always kind of riven by fighting.
And it is true that like most people don't care. Like, I mean, if you go to like any kind of sports game, it's just like a bunch of people from all different backgrounds together, just like being normal. And it's just like, it just like drives home like how forced all of this is and how artificial like these messages really are.
Yeah, the World Cup really drove that home. I'm glad you brought that up because you see, I mean, we did a whole episode on it. Like, I was worried that like we just wouldn't be able to pull it off. Like the logistics would be so fucked up, or, ice at the gates. And obviously there were some hiccups. Like what we did with the team from Iran is shameful, and I'm sure there's things that happened that I don't know about. But you looked, and it's just like normal people having fun, like people who don't spend their time like bopping around thinking about culture war stuff. Instead, they're like, oh man, there's this cool guy from Japan here. I want to show him Bucky's, and that stuff's awesome. And seeing all those people and how much they love it, hearing Erling Haaland saying, like, I love Americans. Like, they're very funny, they're weird. And as he walks around with his little alcohol display with a raccoon or whatever he bought. So that was awesome. And I think just to underscore, like, most people don't care about any of this stuff. Another thing that I think, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here. I think most people care about, I don't think most people really care about trans people. I don't think they're afraid of trans people. I don't think they're afraid of trans swimmers. And I wanted to just touch for a moment on like the Riley Gaines, San Diego State University, all of these issues that have to do with collegiate trans athletes. Riley Gaines famously came in like fifth or sixth place in the NCAA swimming, lost out to a trans woman named, was it Leah Thomas, and has since become like a superstar in the right in the world of sports as someone who's like unfairly penalized by like in their words, like a man competing in women's sports. And I just, it's always amusing to me, like, Leah Thomas did not win. Other women beat Leah Thomas. And Riley Gaines, it's not like she just lost out on second. Like, she was way down. And this is just kind of like an important example of how this stuff works, right? Because it's all misdirection. Like, Riley Gaines wasn't gonna win. It didn't matter if Leah Thomas was there or not, and Leah Thomas didn't win. It didn't matter, anything about her biological makeup. Yet this has become a lightning rod issue on the right. And what I before we came on today, I was actually curious, like, how many trans athletes are in the NCAA? How many people are we talking about here? And I guess the estimate is 10. And when I think about how many hours of complaining and moaning and everything I've heard about this, to find out that there are 10 it was really stunning, really shocking. Kate, you've covered a lot of the issues from the Supreme Court angle. What do you think animates this? I mean, is it the same? Is it just a continuation of what we've been talking about?
Yeah, well, it's so funny how it's almost an exact replication of the anti-abortion playbook in terms of you find the tension points in an issue where people broadly agree, right? Like with abortion stuff, like, you know, most people kind of want a reasonable whatever, right? Like you can get an abortion. They don't like late term abortion, which is not really a thing. That's like kind of a right wing concept. But like there's a lot of commonality there. And on trans stuff, at least before this like kind of hate train that's been going for 10 years, most people probably would end up in like reasonably the same place, right? That trans people should kind of be allowed to exist and like should not be subjected to violence and discrimination. So you find the places that have the toughest, closest questions, and that's almost always has to do with children. So for abortion, the first wedge point was, do minors need parental permission to get an abortion, right? And that spawned all of its own issues, right? Especially when the child, who inevitably, if a child is pregnant, like she was raped, and oftentimes it's by a family member, so having to get parental permission just is a huge issue. But to a person who's not really paying attention, you go around saying like, your tween daughter can be getting abortions left, right, and sideways, and the parents don't even know about it, right? And then with the trans stuff, it's all about minors getting gender reassignment surgery and how fear mongering around that. And then the other entry point is always, we just want to protect women. We're just trying to keep women safe. So with abortion, that was finding the kind of rare examples of people who perform abortions who are kind of endangering women, and then it's ginning up how dangerous abortions are even when they're not. And there's so many kind of false stats that are just completely ubiquitous now that came from the anti-abortion movement, like that getting an abortion is more dangerous than childbirth. It's absolutely not. That mifepristone is an incredibly dangerous drug, which it's not. That getting an abortion increases your chances of having breast cancer, which is not true. And then in the trans women's sports world, we protect women by keeping trans women away from cis women, because they are really men, and that's dangerous. Do you want a man coming into like physical contact with a woman, right? And that is something that sounds weird to people who aren't paying attention. So it's another good entry point to like yank in your more casual news consumer who hasn't really devoted a lot of attention to the issue, and getting them on your side. So they're like, yeah, that is weird, right? Maybe they do have a point about this anti-trans stuff.
It opens the door for like insane privacy issues going forward that I don't feel like people fully appreciate. So like, for example, I mean, if you want to like prevent, it's also going to end up hurting women. Let's just say that it's obvious, because let's say that you have a youth sports or something like that, and there's there's a girl that's like, hit puberty first or whatever, and she's bigger than all the other girls. You don't think that people are going to start asking if she has like, if that's a trans person, or that someone's going to do it. They're going to be like, I want to see that girl's testosterone levels or something like that. And now all of a sudden it's going to be this insane thing, because that's literally what they're proposing, that you would test women like in college to see their testosterone levels. Like, what are we talking about? Like, it's
And it
totally
is what,
insane.
perhaps not coincidentally, what PHAG stuff announced he was going to do to the military yesterday.
Yeah.
Which like I don't know if that's coming from an anti-trans thing or just like a really stupid like internet guy thing, but like they are testing people's testosterone levels for whatever reason.
It's clearly like totally related, right? This because they
Yeah.
have this like essentialist view of gender, right? That people can be neatly sorted into one box or the other. So
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, you can do it through these scientific methods when it's always been more complicated than that. And like AOC was so good on this that she got asked about the trans girls in sports thing, and she was just like, this is going to end up with like Republican congressmen depending that like little girls' genitals be inspected before they can play sports. Like that's where this goes. It's the same as the bathroom bans. It's the same as all of this. It was never to protect women. It was to police the gender divide and make sure that nobody is kind of running afoul of the idea of like traditional femininity and everything that comes with that.
Yeah, it's so weird that like they have all this like incredibly advanced technology, like testing people's testosterone levels, like trying to sussing out the like people's like biological status in a way that is just like uh kind of like incredible when you think about it. And they pair it with these like really archaic beliefs, like more testosterone equals good, or like just like these like kind of like religious strictures that like I think even like 20 30 years ago would have been considered like fringe or like archaic, and now here we are, like they're just in charge of everything. um it's
We're
like a
also
weird
kind of
combo.
like we're also kind of like it's not exactly the same, but like it's definitely in the same ballpark of when of like race science, where people think that there's this construct that, like you said, is completely distinct and separable, right? Different races and now different genders. And so you have people who kind of like who think they can line up and just kind of put people in buckets. Like you go over here, you go over here. And it's just as a species, like we got to learn our lesson that like nature doesn't, we apply words to nature, but nature is not aware of the words we apply. And these divisions are in our minds. We make the divisions, right? The nature is not aware of its own divisions. And I want to just, there's not enough time to get into the story, but the listeners, there is a track athlete who his name is Castor Semenya, and is not trans, is intersex, and has been for like over a decade now, has been subject to continual tests. I shouldn't even say intersex because she says she's just a woman. So correction there, but she's been subject to tests over and over and over and over again because she doesn't fit into these boxes, right? She doesn't have, she has essentially female genitalia, but she doesn't have female chromosomes, is the way it breaks down. So she manifests as like a stronger looking woman. Um, what do you do? What do you just have to have like a third category of people that we don't know where to put them? These questions are really difficult, and they're not easy. Again, go look up Castor on your own. I don't have time to go into all the details. It's like a long saga, but it's absolutely worth your time, especially an article in the New Yorker by, I think, Jill Lepore, maybe like in 2009, something like that. Find it. It's really good.
And this stuff, like, it just leads to everyone who doesn't look the way you think they should be policed, right? Like,
Yeah.
when Serena Williams was playing, she used to get drug tested at like exponentially higher levels than other women on the tour just because, like, she's always been so strong and her build was different than how we thought of women tennis players at the time, which were, thin, small, white women. So, I mean, it's all in service again of like imposing this brutal kind of hierarchy where there's only certain types of people and you can either be a boy or a girl and that looks one way or the other. It's just all the enemy of, what America's supposed to be when it's at its best, which is this like multicultural, melting pot. There's room for all different kinds of people and you can be whatever kind of boy or girl you want, that can look like whatever it looks like for you. And that's why, like, to some degree, I know that, I mean, the right is kind of in charge of everything right now, but that's why it's what they're trying to do is such an uphill climb that's never really going to work because you just can't force people into these rigid of roles without, facing rebellion and people who just don't fit, people who could do anything, who could try their hardest and they would never, look like and act like how you want them to be.
The last thing on this, it's just there's a very it's just a logical question that they can never answer, which is, and I've asked people this, and they don't know what to say. They tend to acknowledge the existence of intersex people. Formerly, they would have been called hermaphrodites. That's not a word we're supposed to use anymore. They acknowledge that there are people that are born with, with sort of not the normal equipment, for lack of a better word. So obviously, though they exist, right? Those people exist. Everyone acknowledges that they're real. So obviously, there are more than two options. You're acknowledging that it's just like a logical inconsistency. It's like we have men, there are women, and then you're telling me there's a third thing at least. There's at least a third thing. I don't know. This is just me having studied logic in college, like losing my mind. It's like literally doesn't get us anywhere. I have been struggling with that for decades, and I think I just need to get over it.
That reminds me of my favorite ever Joe Biden quote, where someone asks him how many genders there are, and he says at least 3, and then they say, "What are they?" And he says, "Don't play with me, kid." Oh, I love it. It's so
That's
good.
a great answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't play with me.
It's good.
All right.
I think there's one point that we're
ahead.
missing, right? Which is just that they, like on the right, there's also like a tendency to try to play the refs. And I think that was showed really clearly with what happened with FIFA and the World Cup.
Yes.
And the US team. Yeah. Like, I don't know, do you want to recount that, Joe?
Yeah, so set this up. For those of you who were watching the World Cup, you'll remember this. For those of you who weren't, the United States had an important match coming up, and a player had been suspended the previous game, and he's one of the United States' best players. His name is Folarin Balogun, who is, well, I'll get to that in a second. Anyway, the point is he was not supposed to play. Okay, he got a red card in the match before. When you get a red card, you're suspended from the following match. One thing, Trump, talked to FIFA, talked to Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA or whatever, and somehow all of a sudden that suspension was, the suspension was suspended. He was allowed to play, and this obviously caused an uproar because this is not how it's supposed to work. This is not how FIFA operates. Whether or not the red card was like right or wrong, this doesn't happen. And everyone lost their minds. And then there was like kind of like a culture war fight about like, if you think it's bad for the president to get a player on the field, then you just hate America. And then there were other people saying like, I don't know, kind of just makes us look bad. Like this isn't what we're supposed to do. And it was also a distraction because Team USA went out there and they got their ass beat, and the game was horrible. I mean, they looked really, really bad. And after the game, Balogun himself said the reversal caused a lot of outside noise, and that's really hard to avoid. So he's not saying we lost because of Trump, but he's saying that didn't really help that much. And I think this speaks to like this impulse to work the refs, to involve yourself in a game because you think that's winning. But really what it reveals is like you don't really understand sports, which is because if you did, you would know that a team needs to be focused on the game, right? It's not just like math where you just have the players, you do the inputs, and then they go out and they perform to the best of their abilities automatically. These are human beings with psychological components going on. And everyone in the world was talking about this, and they're human. They hear that, right? They hear that. And whether or not that's why they lost, it definitely did not help. And it's just, again, an example of this meddling we've been talking about.
Yeah, and
for
on
the
top
last
of the
40 minutes.
psychology, it's also just like who wants to win that way? It's like you don't really feel like you've actually accomplished anything if you win by cheating. So like I don't want to get like all like hoity-toity about like honor, but like there's also that going on too.
No, totally. It's such an extension of Trump's own like complete lack of integrity, where like if he wins an election by, cheating, whether it be like Russian interference or vote meddling or whatever, like all the same to him, right? He still gets to be president. Like there's just no iota of him that like has any devotion to, winning the right way. So you said, Josh, it's like he's completely devoid of honor. That's not a concept that would even make sense to him.
No.
Yeah, and I mean he
And
says it explicitly in politics, which is like that's stupid, right? Like it's like Domino play by the rules. If you're smart, you cheat.
yeah. It's worth pointing out too that the person that he was interceding on behalf, Balogun, there is not a better example of someone who would have been affected by if the Supreme Court had changed birthright citizenship. He was literally born in the United States on accident because his parents' flight got canceled. Okay? They were not here. Like there was no, that's it. Literally. He was on his way out. His mom was on his way out, couldn't fly, so gave birth here. Like, and that's why he's a United States citizen. All right. Like there was no plan. And just the irony of that is amazing. Like they literally, there was a possibility before that game, the Supreme Court decision goes the other way. He's not on the team anymore because he's no longer a United States citizen. But at the same time, you have Donald Trump who is pushing for that, advocating on his behalf, because systems and rules don't matter. Like you said, it's all just one-on-one personal favors and just chaos.
It's also how racists have always operated, right? That like you take the output of the race you're trying to put down while still kind of enforcing like segregation or disproportionate law enforcement like on that group. It's like when you in past days you would have like jazz singers perform and have to like come in separate entrances, or like when Gone with the Wind got the Oscars and Hattie McDaniel was not allowed to sit with the rest of the white cast even though she won a fucking Oscar. It's just, yeah, it's also interesting what you said, because we wanted to briefly, I think, touch on the Supreme Court aspect of all this and like birthright citizenship stuff. They had a trans girls in sports case this term. It is striking the degree to which the court has just become an arm of the culture war on the right. Like there is no gulf now between the issues that the court is taking up and what like Fox News is devoting its A block to.
Yeah, and they're talking. They're kind of like talking to each other, right? Like Kavanaugh kind of like sending messages to Mike Johnson, like you got to carry on the baton, my friend.
Totally.
My favorite is when
it's
like
really
Alito
rough.
or somebody, I think it's usually Alito, just references something that like only conservative media have like made, like sort of brought into existence. Like I feel like this happens on cases all the time, and it's like, where are you
Something
getting
that's
the
like
information from?
incomprehensible if you don't have like the right wing
Right.
media ecosystem IV in your arm. You're like, what
Yeah,
are you talking about?
unfortunately, we at TPM do have that idea in our arms or
Right,
something.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other thought? Well, wait, you know what? We should also. Okay, we'll close on this, and because it demonstrates that Trump ruins things, but he can't totally ruin something. There's always hope. The Knicks had this amazing run through the playoffs. Okay, it was like nothing that anyone has ever seen, especially a Knicks fan. And they won like, I don't remember, they won like 12 games in a row or something like that on their way to, and then they're in the NBA finals and they lost one game. They lost one game. And it was the game Trump showed up for and just made a absolute mockery of MSG. Like it was impossible to get in. Like the whole city was like a disaster for one day. And so that Trump could show up and get booed by everyone at MSG. Knicks lose that game, but they went on to win the finals. So it's a hopeful message. Like Trump can try his best to ruin everything, and he's definitely going to ruin some things, but we'll persevere. We'll come through in the end.
Like if there's one thing that we could achieve, to me, it would be putting the Ted Cruz sports curse onto Trump, right? Like everyone knows every time Ted Cruz goes to like an Astros game or something, like they're going to lose. Like he is just like cursed. And it's like, we're starting to rack up examples of Trump doing the same, right? The Knicks game, he fucked over the men's soccer team. It's like, He has the opposite of the Midas touch, and we should be talking about it more.
He goes to the. He goes to the Army Navy game every year, and like they're losing wars to Iran. Like, I mean, everything he, you know.
Yeah. I mean, this is the Midas touch thing. This is something people have said, is that he has the Midas touch, but instead of gold, everything he touches turns to shit.
There you go.
Yeah, which kind of works for a lot of things.
Poetic. That's all you need.
We didn't even touch. Okay, so I forgot about this. We didn't even touch on one of my favorite like little annoyances, which was, so as I was getting ready today, I was like, what's the right shirt today? And I realized I have this shirt that just says Hustle, which is like a Charlie Hustle, which is Pete Rose's old nickname. And that's kind of where it all began this term, which was Trump got into office and like, you know, there's poverty and there's all kinds of stuff going on. He's like, I need Pete Rose to get in the Hall of Fame. That's where I'm going to start this term. And even the MLB commissioner's like, I mean, I guess we could lift, it's not even really up to us. Like, you know, the Hall of Fame is like a separate entity. It was just a great way to start the term of Trump advocating for someone who doesn't even have control over it. And, you know, that's the beginning of his interference in sports. And it was a really nice way to, you know, send us off, I think.
Do you know why? Like, Trump has never struck me as anyone who actually follows sports. It feels like he just kind of dips in when he gets to make it about him. Like, why did he care about that guy?
I think he might have had a personal relationship with Pete Rose.
There you go.
I'm not entirely sure, but
golf buddies, maybe.
I think he might have just looked at it as like, I don't like, you know, like I had the most hits, and he bet. What people like to say is like he bet on himself to win. Okay, it's not like he was betting against himself. That's always been what people say, and it's like, whatever. I don't really care. What I do know is people in Cincinnati, I think, did not want him to go into the Hall of Fame. I think people in Cincinnati don't have the relationship with Pete, which is who he played for. I don't think they have the relationship with Pete Rose that people think, at least according to my buddy who's a big Reds fan and works for Major League Baseball. So I think Trump maybe just misread the room there if he didn't have a personal relationship, thinking like this is the thing everyone in baseball wants, and it's not really that simple.
I see.
All right, well, Kate, thanks for doing this. This is great. It's nice to
thanks for coming on, Kate.
break out and talk about some sports.
Thanks for having me. This is like one of my favorite topics, so anytime.